we commandeered a couple of vehicles from town. We loaded up the wounded, and we drove 10 minutes down the road to get to the dirt airfield. However many hours later, they landed a CASA on the dirt airfield, and our guys from Djibouti got out, along with a bunch of PJs that they brought from Djibouti to secure the wounded and treat those guys. They got off with us, so ammo resupply, brought some other stuff with them. The bird left with the wounded to fly back to Djibouti, and then the 5 of us went back to the patrol base and basically just camped out for the night until the sun came up. We didn't tell anybody that there weren't any Americans on the plane, the wounded. So when it showed up in Djibouti, it was PJs with a bunch of wounded Somalis, and no one in Djibouti was even aware of the operation. So they ended up in the hospital there on the naval base in Djibouti, and all those guys ended up living, which is cool. But yeah, we kind of surprised them with that one. So the sun comes up the next morning. We ended up going over the hill as a more capable force, because now there were 6 of us. And we had one local that we had recruited out of town that spoke enough English that we could at least communicate with the Somalis that were with us. They weren't really willing to go over the hill again because they had witnessed what happened the day before. But they eventually and reluctantly came with us, and we thought at least they could help us with recovery of some of the bodies if it was 2 and 3 or whatever. Yeah, no, they're Arabs, and they weren't touching a body after that much time later. So we ended up moving through the area. A couple of guys dying. Most of them were already dead. We had a guy that we thought for sure was Harun Fazul. Looked just like him. I mean, same skin tone, and had a pair of glasses. Like, it was a lot of similarities that we thought it was him. Nobody that looked like Nabhan. And the rest of the guys were like a who's who of bad guys from around the globe. Like 2 guys with British passports, like legit British passports.
No shit.
A Yemeni, a Syrian. Like, it was this random collection of, it was exactly what we thought it was. And so we're on the radio. We've got a possible for Harun Fazul, whatever his call sign was at the time. And they're like, all right, well, we're going to fly in an SSE team to do DNA testing and confirm. We need you to take them up to the site. And we're like, we're not doing that. And they're like, why wouldn't you do that? And I'm like, I'm not taking an FBI team that's never been to combat, never been trained, into the hills of northern Somalia where I don't know how many guys are still running around out here. Like, I had no way to confirm or deny if we'd gotten them all. I knew we had a bunch of bodies, but I had no way of knowing if we had gotten everybody. And so there's some back and forth on the radio. What we ended up agreeing on was we bagged up the guy that we thought was Harun Fazul, and we carried him off the mountain, threw him in the back of a truck, and then drove him down to the airfield. So when they landed, all they had to do was get off the plane and deal with the possible. And then we could give them all the other intel we collected, so passports and money and they had laptops and all kinds of stuff. Smorgasbord of intel. It was a decent hit in that respect. But yeah, so the FBI guys get off the plane. I unzip the body bag for them. They peel it back. It took them 2 seconds. They grabbed him, they rolled him up on his side, they pulled his shirt up, and he had no scar. And they said, it's not him. And we were like, what? And they're like, it's not him. I'm like, how do you know that fast that it's not him? You didn't do anything. And they go, yeah, Harun Fazul had appendicitis. He had his appendix taken out in whatever year. He's got no scar where his appendix was removed. And we're like, damn, that quick. They just shut, like, all that for nothing, We're all proud of ourselves. So we're bummed out. We're like, all right, well, let's wrap it up. Like, the rest of those bodies, we got plenty of intel. Like, it is what it is. Like, the Somalis are all still alive. They're back in Djibouti. Let's get out of here. So we loaded up and flew back to Djibouti. There's a little bit of a reception there from the handful of people that did know where we were. We get to the hangar, and, all 3 of us are just covered in blood. Not our own, but I've got cuts all up and down my arms from the sharp corally rocks that we'd been moving around on the ridgeline. And then, the wounded Somalis and all that stuff. So we looked quite a sight to people that saw us coming into the hangar that we were in. And about 5 minutes after we're there, a little Navy dude comes knocking on the door, opens the door, comes in. He says, hey, the admiral that is in charge of the base needs whoever was just involved in whatever went down to come brief him. And we're like, okay, can you give us a few minutes, like, to clean up, like, whatever? And he's like, well, he just said as soon as possible. And we're like, okay, whatever. So let's tell him we're coming. So the kid leaves. We, like, run through the shower, put on a fresh set of DCUs or whatever we were wearing, pants and shirts. And so we leave. We walk onto the main compound there, off the airfield. We finally find where his little headquarters is. We walk in, and one of his staffos or secretary or somebody's like, the admiral's back here, blah, blah, blah. So they take us in this little conference room. And he's sitting at the head of the table. He's standing up, and a couple of his staff officers, junior guys are in the room with him. And he's like, gentlemen, how you doing? Come on in and have a seat. And so we go in and we sit down. And he's like, mind you, the whole way over there, we're like, we're screwed. Like, this dude is going to flip a gasket. Like, who are you? How was I not aware of this? How did you involve my warship that I'm responsible for? Who cleared this? We're assuming no conversation has been had, and it hasn't. So he's like, look, you guys have had a pretty wild, rough 24 hours, huh? And we were like, yes, sir. Like, just waiting. And he's like, so tell me the story. Like, how did you get there? And we're like, well, and we kind of gave him the brief. Like, we've been doing some targeting. We've been working on this. We've been in and out of Somalia a number of times. We had an opportunity at some really important folks and to disrupt the network in a substantial way. And we just felt like it was an opportunity that we needed to take. And he's like, well, had you been planning this? And we were like, nope. It was pretty much a hasty decision that was supported by 3-letter agencies and DC in the moment because of the significance of the targets. And yeah, they asked us if we were okay doing it, and that's what we did. And again, I'm waiting for the reaction, and he goes, that's the coolest shit I've ever heard.
That's awesome.
And Phil, who's hilarious, Phil busts out laughing, and then it's a comfy conversation. And he's like, so you guys, the 3 of you just decided you were going to go do this. And we're like, yep. And he's like, man, you guys have some huge balls. And so to this day, if that man, whoever it is, and I don't remember his name, but if he's ever out there and ever hears this, I've said it once before, I would love to hear from him, just to like have a conversation about that day and how funny it was and get like more of his perspective. But yeah, so it ended up being a really good engagement, and he was grateful. We were grateful that his guys reacted the way that they did, that they shifted mission. They had no clue, and they were spot on. Their rounds were spot on. I mean, all their training and anything they'd ever done in peacetime came to fruition.
That's some of the coolest shit I've ever fucking heard.
So we got home, and it was I think all of us collectively within our organizations, we ended up briefing various elements within our different commands about what went down, how it happened, why, because this was the first thing outside of GWAT. This is the first time guys had been engaged outside of Iraq, Afghanistan, and a little bit in Pakistan, right? So it was a big deal in terms of getting in a gunfight somewhere like that, but we didn't really understand the significance of the impact. Like, to us, we didn't get the guys we were after. Like, we missed our mark. Yeah, we killed some bad guys that needed to be killed, but we missed our mark. Well, I didn't find out for, I don't know, a month later. I'm having dinner with a JSOC intel analyst that's a friend of mine, and she's talking about, do you understand what went down? And I'm like, no. And I'm like, we didn't get our guy. And she's like, no, they haven't even told you guys? And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? And she proceeds to tell me that what happened was, after that engagement, one of the guys that we killed was a Yemeni dude, and they called him the Bear. And he was the chief movement officer for all foreign fighters coming into and out of the Middle East and Africa. So he was basically the gatekeeper for bringing guys in, depositing them in Somalia, after they were trained up, bringing them back to Yemen, and then facilitating their rat line movement into the Middle East. The Sudanese guy that we thought was Sarun Fazul was like AQ's primary IED teacher. They called him the professor. So he had been in southern Somalia for years teaching guys how to build IEDs. The 2 British passport holders were dudes that were actual British citizens that had had some level of training and had been teaching shooting and marksmanship in southern Somalia to foreign fighters. It was like this.
Holy shit.
And so conversations and intelligence that was collected right on the heels of that was that AQ leadership in the Middle East had completely lost faith in the ability to traffic foreign fighters into and out of Somalia. And it stayed that way for nearly 2 years. So it shut down that whole pipeline for like 2 years after that event.
Wow.
So like when a year later, when Captain Phillips went down, Somali pirates, they had nothing to do with GWAT. That was just Somalis being Somalis in that part of the world. And like the guys had nothing. Like there was nothing going on anywhere. Somalia had its own issues, Al-Shabaab and all that stuff. But the connection between Greater AQ and the Horn of Africa had been completely disconnected. So yeah, that was the last gunfight I was ever in. For me, it was one of the most significant. With all the amazing things that I was lucky enough to be a part of, it stood out to me because it was a handful of operators with different background and experiences that, if it hadn't been the three of us, if it hadn't been an Air Force guy, a Navy guy, and an Army guy together, I don't know that we would have thought of all the things to do that we did, and I just skimmed over it. But I don't know that collectively we would have survived that day. Like, it literally took an idea from each guy, and all of us being a part of that to kind of effectively do what we did that day and then get out of it unscathed. And so, yeah, it really, the piece with the Admiral at the end, even funnier is it, so like, I don't know, it's probably 6 months later, I get a phone call on my team room phone, which is a secure line that only people within certain elements of JSOC would even have the ability to look up and access. And I answer the phone, and it's, I don't know, someone that works at JSOC, or maybe it was someone that works up at the beach. But basically they were calling me to ask me if I would write the narrative to accompany the SEALs to Phil's Silver Star recommendation. And I was like, absolutely. Like, my unit didn't do that. they gave us another Bronze Star with V, you know what I mean, in your inbox. But we were wired different. So I was happy. I was really excited. I was like, yeah, that's cool. So I hang up the phone. So like 10 more minutes goes by, and the team room phone rings again, and it's the Air Force guy. It's Brady, and Brady's like, do you believe we both got screwed and they want us to write the narrative for Phil Silver Star? And he wasn't upset about Phil getting it. He was upset that all three organizations didn't talk to each other and like do the same thing. And so anyway, so we had a laugh about it. He was being funny. And I was like, you're going to do it right? He's like, absolutely. And so, yeah, so the three of us to this day, like, it's a memory that we share that will never go away. And yeah, it was the last real gunfight I ever got in.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.